Hello, my name is Jabulile Skosana. I am 30 years old. I'm a mother of one. I am based in Midrand. I was born and raised in Kliptown. Kliptown is an informal settlement in Soweto. I was led to believe that I was one of 5 siblings. When my parents met, my father had 3 kids and my mother had 1 son. So my father had 2 sons and 1 daughter. I met the first son from my father's side when he came to visit. He came to see where his father was staying in Kliptown. That's when I didn't really meet him. It was not, Jabu, this is your brother. My mother told me a while after he had left that that was your brother. With the second brother from my father's side again, he used to come home when he was in trouble. He was a well-known criminal where he was staying. So he used to come home and it was his hiding place. So we knew there was something wrong. He was on the run whenever he came home. Then the third sister, I met her when I went to say hi to her mother in White City. It's not far from Kliptown. So I would randomly say hi to her mother whenever I was in the area. When I went to say hi to the mother told her that, hey, your sister is here. Jabulile is your little sister. And I never got to see her face because she spoke from a distance and said, oh, hi, and that was it. And then my brother from my mother's side, that's my mother's son, we've always had a great relationship. Now that's always been my big brother. He would come visit very often. He didn't stay with us. None of them stayed with us. It was just myself, my mother, and my father. So growing up at home, we had some happy days and some really hectic days when my parents were not getting along. Then I remember when I was young, it was before I even started primary school, I had made a mistake. I don't remember what I had done, but my father got so angry. He just said, come here. So I went to my father not knowing what he had in store for me. And on that day, there was a tin fire. We call it imbaula. On top of that tin fire, we had put something that was made of steel. So we'd normally put that thing if you're about to boil water on the tin fire, or maybe you're going to cook on the tin fire. So I went to my father because he said, come here, and I had done something wrong. So I went to him and I thought he was going to reprimand me, or I don't know, I was just not expecting what he gave me, but he slapped me so hard, I hit the steel that was on the tin fire in Baula. By the time I landed on the floor, that steel was on the floor and it burnt my face. So my face landed on that steel. So I knew that I was very afraid of my angry father. I was very scared of my dad when he was mad. Then I grew up around the ages of 8, 9. Their relationship got really hectic. They were just not getting along with my mother. My mother was very vocal. My mother was okay, she was just very strong verbally. She would say things that I knew would take my father off, and it was going to be physical before you know it. Then it got really intense at home. Now the fighting was just hectic. My father would go to work. He was a taxi driver around 4 a.m. in the morning and come back around 8:30 to 9 in the evening. Then when he would come back, it would be a normal day, or sometimes it would be a day where they're fighting, but it was more of the fighting more than the normal days. My father started not coming back at home on some days. He would just not come back maybe for 2 evenings, and then when he comes back, it's a big fight. Then he started not coming back for even more days. I guess he was avoiding the fights as well, or maybe he had just found another life out there. So my father wouldn't come back for a few days, and it got to a point where my mother stopped talking. My mother would just be moody, but she was miserable. I could see that my mother was not happy, and she was just not happy with anyone and everyone around, because even with me, she just couldn't stand me. She became a very angry mom around that time when my father wasn't sleeping at home. And before then, when I started school, my mother was not a very affectionate mom, and my dad has always been my big teddy bear. I call my father my big teddy bear because he had so much love in him. My father is the kind of father I would run to, and he would pick me up and walk all the way home with me. I would wait for him from a distance, and this was late at night, but I knew I had to wait for my dad because I wanted him to lift me up and take me home. So my father was very exciting. My father loved me dearly. The kisses, the cuddles, there's nothing I didn't get from my father. On my mother, on the other side, we didn't have a very healthy relationship, or not much of a relationship, but she was not like other mothers who would walk their kids to school, especially on the first day of school. I remember on the first day of school, I went to school on my own because I saw my friends going there, and my mother was mad, asking, why did you go? Because the school was now calling her to tell her that it's time for me to come to school because my age was appropriate for grade 1. But my mother was angry, and when I asked my mother what was I going to do that year, because I was not going back to preschool, she said I was going to stay that year. I was just going to be in the area, then start school when I was 8. But I wanted to start school because my friends were at school already. So my relationship and my mother's, it was just that typical daughter and mother relationship where I would question things. Why are you not loving me like other kids? Why are you not walking me? There'd be announcements that maybe girls are being raped at the bridge and the parents should walk kids to school. But my mother wouldn't walk me to school. She'd always say, you'll find other kids that are walking with their mothers. You'll join them, so just go. So my relationship with my mother was, I guess it had a bit of emptiness to it, but I loved my mother and I still love my mother dearly. My father on the other side was that opposite of my mother. So my father was all the love. So my father stopped coming back home after work for more days than normal, because at some point the 2 days out were normal. But he extended the days. Now he was not coming back for longer. Then my mother would just take it and just not fight anymore. She would keep quiet and just be grumpy, be moody, be ticked off, be ticked by anything that you do, just be irritable. Then it got to a point where my mother decided to just leave. She didn't pack up her stuff, she just left, and I didn't know where my mother was. So on those first few days, I would go look for my mother, and wherever I go, I'd find that, yeah, she was there, but go look for her at another place. So I would just go around looking for my mother, and I wouldn't find my mom. Then my dad was the one now who was coming home more than my mother. My mother would only come home when she needed something. Maybe she needed other clothes or she needed a change of something, but she just didn't come home to sleep at home and just be with me. So at home it was a shack. And I was now left alone at home. Then my father started being the one who comes home more often than my mom. My mother would come home, my father would come home, and I'd be alone at home, and he would always ask, and there were times when he would really accuse me of knowing where my mother was, saying I was hiding her. And she would just be angry, she would just be mad, asking, where is your mother? And I never knew where my mother was, and I'd always say, I don't know, I tried to find her, but she just couldn't, he just couldn't stand me. That was my father now. He just couldn't stand me at that time. Then it got to a point where my dad started being physical with me, because normally he would beat up my mother. In those arguments, when he used to argue with my mother, he would always beat up my mother. But now my mother was not home and I was home alone. Then my father started being physically aggressive with me. So he'd be ticked off by anything I do, every little thing that I do at home. He would just be mad, and I started being a very messy child, because even holding a cup was now different. I would just drop things. I was just very messy. And my father would always find an opportunity, find a reason to beat me up. And he started being very aggressive with me. Whenever my father would beat me up, he would make sure that it was so bad that it would affect my life in a certain way. It's either I couldn't go to play, or I just couldn't go to school because I was not okay. I couldn't walk. On this one occasion when he came with the shambok, he wouldn't bring a shambok to the house. He had never done that before. But clearly he had intentions of using it on me on that evening. And I hadn't seen him for a few evenings before then. But he came home with the shambok and he used it on me, and I couldn't sit at school. I had to take a pillow. I had to take a pillow with me to school so I could sit on it, because he had wounded me so bad. There was no love in my father's beatings. He didn't feel anything for me anymore. I could just tell. My father would be sensitive. My father was very caring. My father was my teddy bear. But he was not that man anymore. He was just very angry. Then on this one, I want to call it special, but on this one particular day, my father's 2 grandkids came to visit. And they were running around. I could see them running around. They were very excited. They were happy kids. They had always been happy kids. We knew them. But also very naughty as well. I was around the ages of 8, 9, but I could already see that those little kids were a responsibility. So whenever they were around, you had to watch them closely because they were very naughty. So the kids were running around, and there was a curtain that was dividing the bedroom and the kitchen. So the curtain was between the bedroom and the kitchen. I was standing outside while they were doing all of this running around, but they would also run outside the house. When I walked in because my father was about to come back home. So I wanted to make sure that everything is in place because I was not trying to get another hiding. When I walked in, I saw a curtain on the ground. I panicked. That curtain couldn't be on the floor. That was a big deal because my father would beat me up for the smallest things in the house. He would be ticked off by the smallest things in the house. So I knew I had to make sure that curtain is up before my father walked in. I was really scared because it was already very dark. I took the curtain. It had a string that I had to push into the curtain and pull on the other side of the curtain so I could hang the curtain. While I was trying to push that curtain I was trying to push that string into the curtain, my father walked in. I couldn't have done it fast enough. I was a mess. I was shaking. I was scared. I'm trying to push it in, and my father just walks in. I remember standing up out of panic. I don't know what I was thinking. I just remember standing up from that chair where I was going to stand to hang the curtain. And I looked at my dad, and he just came charging at me. Then I woke up in hospital. I still don't know what my father did to me on that day. It was a very lonely place. I was very confused. I didn't understand what was happening. I woke up with some headaches. I didn't understand how bad it was or what my father did to me. I just didn't understand what was happening. I don't remember how I was discharged, but I just remember walking to the family friend. I was really young to be discharged on my own, but I just remember walking to that family friend's house. And it was my mother's family friend. I got there and I stayed for 2 days, and then I went home. When I got home, it was a scary place to be at. My father had just taken it to a brand new level. Now I was more than afraid of my dad. I was really scared. I got home and I decided not to go to school anymore. I was just not okay. I just wanted to be at home every day. When I finally decided to go back to school, it was because there was no food at home and there was food at school. And the day would just be different when you had gone to school. You know, you get to spend time with friends, and there's just that teacher that cares about me so much. Even though I knew I was not going to tell her anything, I just wanted to be in her presence. Then I went to school, and when I got to school, there was this teacher. Very caring teacher. She was very concerned about me. And as soon as she saw me, she called me to the principal's office. We got there, and the principal was also there. They started asking a lot of questions, and I was just not responding. But I think my emotions were just all over the place now. I just couldn't keep it in anymore. That's when I broke down for the very first time in front of all of them. I cried so much. Little did I know they had already called the police. When the police arrived, I was also scared now, thinking, am I going to get arrested for not coming to school? Did I do something wrong? I was really afraid. But they had already asked for my aunt's number, and I had given it to them, and she was already on the way to come get me from school. When my aunt got there, they spoke to her, and then she told me we were going to the child welfare. We got to the child welfare, and we met the social worker that I also couldn't speak to because I was just an emotional mess. And then we had to come back the following day. When we came back the following day, I think my scars spoke more than my mouth on that day, because I was still not okay emotionally. I just couldn't speak for myself. And that's when they decided that I needed to be placed at a place of safety. To me, it didn't make sense, because I didn't think my father was really a threat. I thought my father was going through whatever he was going through, but my father loved me. I thought these people don't understand. My father loves me. My father's got 3 other kids. My mother has a son outside, but I am the child he is raising. My father is crazy about me. But they said I had to be placed where my father couldn't find me. And that's when they went to place me at an orphanage. I got to the orphanage. I was not okay. I was crying a lot. The nights were the most difficult times of the day. I would cry so much. I would go to bed and I would watch the episodes in my mind of my parents' arguments. My parents would just say things, and there were things that I would remember when I was alone, just listening to their argument. Now they were not even in my presence, but I was alone, and I would just watch those episodes playing, and there'd be things that would just leave me having a lot of questions, wondering, what was he saying? What was she saying? What was my father trying to say? And there was one thing that just came and it changed my life forever. It was a big argument between my father and my mother, and we had visitors. My two uncles from the Eastern Cape had come to visit their brother. They had a little traditional ceremony at home, so my mother had to brew some alcohol, some traditional alcohol. And while that was happening, these were brothers to my father. I mistakenly kicked a glass that had traditional beer, and my father snapped. My father was so angry. But the thing that was different about that day was that my father did not get physical with my mother. But he was cursing a lot, he was saying a lot. And one of the things that stuck with me in that argument, one of the things that I remembered when I was dealing with those episodes, when I was living in those arguments, was my father saying, "Do not forget that Jabu is not my child." And I remember waking up the following day asking my mother what my dad was saying. He said, "I'm not his child. What did he mean?" And my mother brushed me off and said, "Oh, don't worry about it. You know your father is your father. Your father loves you." He was just angry. But when that came back now, when I was at the orphanage, I believed it. It was like, it was confirmed that this is not my dad. I want my real father. I went to the social worker and I told her, there's an argument that I remembered. My father was cursing at my mom and he was saying a lot of things, and my mother was trying to stay calm at that time because there were in-laws, the brothers-in-law were there. But my father said these words and they've stuck with me forever, even though I had forgotten them when life was just going on. But at this point, I wanted to know what my father meant. My mother had started trying to come visit the orphanage, even though she would come once after a very long while. But it wasn't too long after I had remembered this and reported to the social worker that I got a visit from my mom at the orphanage. I was okay with my mother coming to visit me. On the first visit, I asked them to tell her that I'm not going to see her, that I want nothing to do with her. But she came again on another day and I said, I've got questions, so I need to see my mother. She came through and I told her about what happened, that at night I'm having these episodes playing in my mind. And there's one that came to my mind and I need answers. And she asked me, what was it? I think at that time my mother was trying to play her role as a mother, just to be there, to try to fix the situation, or maybe just fix wherever she had messed up. That's what I thought. She was very open with me. She was very honest at that time, and I never expected it. The plan was I was going to walk away from my mother and I was going to tell her on that day that I don't want her to visit me anymore. I told her that my father said he was not my dad, so I need to know who my father was. At first she tried to deny it and said, but you know who your father is, Jabu. And I said, no, that was not my father. He said he was not my father, so I want to know who my real father was. And my mother came out with it. My mother told me that that was not my biological father. They met when she was pregnant, and he took me in as his own. He even married my mother. And now it all started making sense. My father loved me so much when I was young because it was still the early days and he was trying to prove to my mother that they can make this work. My father was trying to prove to my mother that he can love me as his own, that they can do this together, they can build a family together. But that was just my father trying to impress my mom. It made sense why he loved me so much on those not so long happy days, and why he hated me so much when all of it was gone, when my mother had walked out of their marriage, and why he was so aggressive with me, and why he didn't mind seeing me bleeding from his beatings. It made a lot of sense because he was trying to hurt my mother. Now the love was gone, the relationship had dissolved, but they had never discussed it, but the love was just not at home anymore. So it made sense why my father was so aggressive and why he was so heartless towards me. I think that is what helped me to let go, because I was still very much crazy about my dad. I looked forward to having a job someday and taking care of my father. But from then onwards, I knew I had to take care of myself. I had to refocus on myself, and I had to heal and make sure I build a better life for myself. Until today, I still say my mother gave me the love she had, and I wouldn't say she had much of it. And I don't know the pain my mother was facing, and I don't know what made my mother the person she became, because she's not an attached mother. She's not a protective mother. She was not someone I could, even when I was being bullied by other kids, she was the last person I could run to, because she would always say, just go back and fight for yourself. But she wouldn't even follow up to make sure that I don't get hurt or I don't die in those fights. But my mother was just not a very concerned mother at that time. And my mother was very close to her alcohol at that time. So I didn't expect to be protected by my mother. It made sense that she was not even there when everything happened, because she was not going to protect me. When I was young, before primary school, and my father hit me so hard, it didn't become a huge deal. My mother was not so mad at my dad. If it was my child, I would have flipped. You can't beat my child up like that, especially such a little girl. I would have gone crazy, but I had understood that my mother's love is not the love I'm seeing around. It's not the TV love. It's not the love my friends are getting from their parents. And I had learned to live with that. I had to deal with my emotional healing. I was a mess emotionally. I could break down anytime, at any point. I remember there was even a day when I was walking from school, and it was just a normal day. And being at the orphanage is being surrounded by other kids who just have no choice but to be children around other kids. So it's always a happy place. We are always together. And on this particular day, I was walking from school. I was walking alone, and I could see the clouds were changing. I didn't know it was about to rain. But a drop of water just hit my forehead. And I had to stop at that moment and touch it and look at it, just to confirm that it was not my mother's blood. So I had a lot of times when I would just go back to those exact moments where my father would beat up my mother and my mother's blood would be all over me, and I'd be screaming, running to the neighbors to come help my mother, because I always thought, now he is killing my mother. And it was just a lot of times where it was just, okay, now this is the last one, my mom's gonna die. So I had to deal with a lot of emotions. I had to deal with a lot of remembering those things and just going back to those moments. It took a while, but when I was finally in the home now, in that setting, fitting in with other kids and having to be a big sister to other kids, I took on that role, and it was one of the most exciting roles ever, because now I got to be something important to someone. I got to be protective of my sisters. I got to advise people when they were making mistakes, and I just had an important role in life now. By the grace of God, I was blessed with a bursary. I got to go stay at the University of Johannesburg, and I acquired my degree in industrial psychology, and not without challenges, because coming from an orphanage to the open society, to the normal world out here, is a huge adjustment for someone who does not know this life. I don't know how many times I have had to walk away from people who one minute loved me and the next minute had to use my history against me, use my story against me. I remember there was even one time where I was in a relationship with a guy who had to tell me that you expect me to treat you like you're important, but your parents failed. I had to take that and just walk away with it. But because I had felt empowered, I knew my place in the outside world, that I am not here to be used, I am not here to be played, and I know what I want. So I think because of the support that I had around me, my family really stepped up. The love was insane. I had amazing friends. And with whatever challenges I got to face in the outside world, I always had people to pick me up. And it is not the case with the majority of the children that come from orphanages. They have to find their own circle, their own small circles where they fit in and they get the love. I was just beyond blessed. So I decided to open an organization called Guanella Foundation. Guanella says enough is enough because the suffering is too much. Where we will be going on a journey of empowering children from orphanages, ensuring that we build up readiness programs that are going to assist them in fitting into the outside society, upskilling them and following up on their lives in the outside world to ensure that they really fit in and they find their purpose in life, and that they are able to be contributors in the economy of the country as well. So I've decided to go on this journey of telling my story and hoping that it heals someone else. I hope I can assist other children who have been in my situation or a similar situation, who have had to be removed from their families or who have had to just feel out of place in their families because of their experiences. And I hope my story makes a difference in someone's life somehow. But I'll definitely be going on a journey of sharing my entire journey, because it does not stop at the orphanage. Life does not give you a break. Life does not say it's over with you. We are done dealing with you. You can just go on and enjoy your life. You still need to face other challenges in life. My name is Jabulile Skosana, and I have been through the most.